And good morning. I am Chris McCarthy. This is WBSM, and our program here is Sunday Brunch. You can reach us at 508-996-0500. But before we take calls, I want to introduce my guest, becoming a regular here, Jack Spillane, my friend from the Standard Times. Jack, good morning.
Good morning.
And I just want to say, Jack came here the last time. He thought he was going to get brunch because of the program's title. It's how we lure guests in. It's how they got me to take the show. Of course, there was no brunch, as I found out and Jack found out. But Jack was good enough to actually bring in brunch this morning.
Well, I just remember the days when Kent Pittman was here and there was some sort of sub shop or something that was always, bringing nice spreads. And I just, I'm going to have a nice spread Sunday brunch. BSM's gonna shout me, and I get here and there's nothing.
Nothing.
Not even coffee.
Not even coffee. Nothing. Nothing.
So,
you're lucky if you get water.
I figured I better bring my own this time, and because of that, I was late. So
that's fine. I appreciate you coming in. Okay. I think, as I mentioned, to set this up, whether you care passionately one way or the other on the Bianco Raid, and certainly there are passions on both sides, it's just a major historic event for southeastern Massachusetts, New Bedford specifically, and the immigration debate and the labor debate and maybe even the election of Donald Trump. Yeah. But it was 10 years ago. Amazing how fast that's gone by.
We talk about 1928 strike as one of the seminal events in New Bedford history. I think 50 years from now, they will call the Michael Bianco Raid a seminal event. However you feel about it, as you said, some people view it as a national security event. Other people view it as a heavy hand of the federal government on immigrants who were lured here to work in fish houses and other places. But however you feel, it was a big deal for some 500 federal agents to come down into the city and to round up 361 people.
Jack, there has, as of late, been some new information that's come to light about the raid. Here on the radio station, you guys may have heard discussion of it as well. You may have even had something in the paper about it that I missed. Sheriff Tom Hodgson, he indicates that the raid was stimulated by members of the federal delegation, members of our congressional delegation, that they, in fact, were the ones who instigated the ICE raid. And I've had other information. Tom Kennedy has said that Leo Pimentel is the one who got the thing started when he was a city councilor, because he knew people who were not getting jobs down there, who worked in the Southend. And then he knew a woman who did get a job, and she said she was being abused, as you've detailed in the paper, the fines for being in the bathroom, not being allowed to, really, really pretty grotesque working conditions. And she complained to Leo, and he called the ICE agent that he knew, who was a New Bedford guy, who came down and did the raid. So do you have any information on that, or what are your thoughts on that?
We actually do, and you have to read the big package in the Sunday Standard Times called Beyond Bianco, if I can make a plug. This morning, I'm looking around. I see the Boston Globe, but I don't see the Standard Times. I would have brought it. But so we have a big package, the entire front section almost of the paper, as well as a good portion of the perspective section, and we talk about just those things. I was intrigued about the sheriff's comments because I heard that he had made them on the radio, that the delegation precipitated that raid. So we asked him about that during the course of interviewing him for this package, and you can call up his video and see that, because it's a video component of this piece. He did not say that. It's not unusual for politicians to say one thing for one audience and something else for a different audience. Not that they're not telling the truth, but they just present it differently. So we asked him, what about the delegation? And what he said was, the delegation was tipped off. That's a quite different thing. And we asked him 2 or 3 different ways, and he said, my understanding is the delegation was tipped off. And so then we pressed him a little bit, and we said, Sheriff, who are your sources for this? And he didn't want to reveal his sources, which is as is right. A lot of great source reporting goes on in this country, and I'm a big defender of it. But he did not go there with the Standard Times interview for whatever reason. But if you do read the package in today's paper, you will see quite a bit of information, not reported on heavily before now, about how that raid did generate. one of our great new reporters, Michael Bonner, came across an individual named Eric Caron. Eric Caron grew up in the city, and he became an ICE agent. He went into law enforcement, got his degree from Northeastern University, and he had retired from ICE and was back in the city, and he got a tip. And that tip came from within the Bianco factory from, I assume, someone who was an American worker or someone who, at any rate, was not an undocumented worker, that there were many, many undocumented workers there, so many that they had a place where you went across the street to get your green card.
Your fake green card.
Your fake green card, right, when you came to work there, and you made it clear that you had seamstress skills but not papers to work in this country. So when that person got the tip, Eric Caron, who was a very interesting guy, grew up on Emory Street, literally a block from the Bianco factory, and there's a big story about him this morning. He was concerned that there were national security issues there, because he wasn't saying that the people from Central America were the national security issue, okay, but if Francisco Insolia, who was the owner of this factory, was allowing deliberately undocumented workers to come in there, someone who had nefarious purposes could, use that ruse, whether they co-opted someone from Central America or someone from anywhere that had stitching skills, because there were men working there too, could get in there. And he was, as you remember, what they made at Michael Bianco was gear, knapsacks for use in the war in Iraq. Right. It's 10 years ago.
It was a military contract.
It was a military contract. So the irony of the whole situation, where you had a military contract largely being made by undocumented workers. I will say this about Sheriff Hodgson. When he did his interview, he was very even in his comments, and he said, in defense of the undocumented workers, it can be argued that they were lured here to work by employers who wanted cheap labor, where they didn't have to pay workers' compensation or health insurance or even union-scale wages.
That's the whole story.
Remember, the Seafarers Union was broken in New Bedford in the 1980s.
Right.
And I once had a UMass Amherst professor who said they couldn't bring the fish houses to the third world, so they brought the third world to the fish houses to get that cheap labor. So even someone as conservative as the sheriff said that these people were lured here to work in not only fish houses but meat packing places in the Midwest and other jobs
chicken
that
farms
Americans didn't really want to do because the social welfare state is so strong. And so that then they get here, and now we're harassing them for being undocumented when we, for many years, maybe 2 decades, turned a blind eye to them. So.
No, well, absolutely. The criminal, the real criminal, is the people who are running the Bianco factory, the Sicilian immigrant who started it in Solia. He
went to jail.
Yeah, he went. Did he go to jail?
A year.
Yeah. His daughter runs the company now. I understand. Her
really?
son. Yeah, they just.
So the company is still in existence.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
I checked last night at the Secretary of State's office. I don't know what they're doing, but they still are active.
Yeah.
They haven't had their corporate designation revoked.
It was interesting. He only paid a $30,000 fine for the undocumented immigrants. He paid $1.5 million for not paying overtime, which I don't know why that was, but that maybe the law is stronger in terms of the fines there. But he had a year in prison, $30,000 fine for knowingly hiring undocumented workers, and I should say, if you prefer the term illegal immigrants, that's fine with me. The Standard Times has a policy, and Jeanette Barnes, another great young reporter who worked on this project, did a little piece about what terminology you use betrays your politics.
Right.
And she said in Europe they actually use the term unofficial migrant because the feeling is that undocumented immigrant betrays liberal politics, illegal immigrant betrays conservative politics. We had a Latino reporter at the Standard Times at one time, and he came to the editor and he made the argument that illegal immigrant is racist, because an action can be illegal, but a human being can't be illegal. And that's when we changed our wording.
Yeah. That's a good theory.
I haven't convinced you.
No, I mean, I don't really care one way or the other because the terms are universal now.
Yeah.
They're interchangeable now. It doesn't. We all know what we're talking about. I think
sort of like pro-life and pro-choice.
Yeah. When the undocumented thing first started coming up, it was a maybe a bit confusing to people. But now when someone says undocumented alien, everyone knows what they're talking about. It's the same thing as an illegal alien. So what we'll do, we'll take a quick break, Jack, and we'll be right back here. You're listening to Jack Spillane and Chris McCarthy on Sunday Brunch.
WBSM Sunday Brunch.
And I'm Chris McCarthy. This is Sunday Brunch. We have in studio this morning Jack Spillane, who was nice enough to actually bring in some brunch and some coffee, because the last time he was here, he found that that wasn't completely true, that this wasn't Sunday Brunch.
It's metaphorical Sunday brunch.
Yes. It's a glass of water if you're lucky. So we're talking about the Bianco Raid, what went on with it. Jack, here has been my curious questions about this. How in the world, in an area where congressmen and senators show up for a $1,500 library grant and cut a ribbon and do all kinds of that great stuff, there was never any fanfare about the Bianco contracts that came to the area, or was there and we just missed it?
That's a good question, and who knows what the actual truth is as to what Tom Hodgson said about the delegation or whatever. We did ask former Mayor Scott Lang what he knew, and he said he was told the Sunday before the raid. And for whatever reason, in his mind, we had raids before, particularly in the fish houses on the waterfront, but it was 10, 12 people, and what they did was they would notify them that you're undocumented, come see us in court at this date. But in this raid, they rounded up people and sent them to Texas or sent them to Devon's and held them. So it was definitely some sort of connection to something bigger. We had the Eric Karen story that it was a national security issue. Bush was in Guatemala. He spoke about the raid while he was in Guatemala that weekend, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of stories. I don't think the full book has been written, yet on Michael Bianco. But for whatever reason, I say Lang said he was shocked by the extent of the raid when 500 people came down Route 18 and surrounded that place. And the sheriff points out that, yes, the complaints were that women were separated from their very young children. When we talked to some of those women, they said, yeah, I didn't tell them I had kids because I was afraid they would separate me from them. So the ones who told the truth were released immediately. The ones who didn't tell the truth ended up in some place like Texas. But you can understand them. You're in a foreign country. You think, if I tell them where my children are they going to send them back or whatever?
Well, that's very interesting, though. I guess we never that's kind of new information to me, or a new perspective on it, that the people who said I have children, they will let go to take care of their kids.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. I must have known it back at the time, but you sort of like the details over a decade get fuzzy. But we went back over all of this, and the sheriff brought it up. He said, because Helena De Silva Hughes had said, she runs the Immigrant Assistance Center, of course, and she was very worried because she could see that mothers were being separated from her kids very quickly, even though the federal agents were saying, no, they're not. We're asking everybody. But she was intuitive enough to think, yeah, they're undocumented immigrants. They're not necessarily telling you the truth about their family situation. What
goes on at that place now? Is there any work going on at that factory now?
I do not think so, but yeah. I wouldn't want to vouch for that. I did talk to the mayor recently, and there's some interest now in that whole cluster of factories near the New Cove walk, the elevated hurricane barrier walkway, the second one they built. Mm-hmm. If you go down there, it's a very breathtaking spot, and
absolutely.
It is has great potential for middle class upscale housing. So I've heard there's some interest in doing that. That's happened in other places in the city. Whether it will happen, I don't know.
The big concern with that contract, of course, you point out it was the agent from this area, and you guys have the full story in today's paper, the Sunday Standard Times. He was a local guy, and he got a tip on this. But those jobs were relatively high-paying jobs, weren't they? If the law had been followed properly, they were prevailing wage government jobs.
Well, my understanding is the reason Insolia was making so much money was because he wasn't paying very much.
That's what I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying. In other words, had he been following the law, the workers would have been making a decent wage down there. But he was paying them a pittance and violating all the rules and taking the huge difference
Right.
in between, because it was a prevailing wage contract.
And Lang brought that up to us. He said there's no shortage of people who are trained stitchers in the city of New Bedford. It's hard to believe they couldn't find people to do the work. It sounds similar to what happened with the seafood houses. There was once a union where, as grimy as that work is, people could make a decent living there.
Right.
Now people get paid very low wages for working there.
Yeah, they use the undocumented workers, the illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them, to break the unions.
Yeah, and the way it has worked since then, although I can't say now, but 10 years ago when myself and Becky Evans, a former reporter, did a investigation on the immigrants on the waterfront, temporary agencies were supplying the workers. So the temporary agencies, many of which were fly-by-night. John Mitchell prosecuted a big one, I think it was called F&B, when he was an assistant U.S. attorney. They would supply the immigrants to the seafood houses, and of course, they wouldn't pay any workers' compensation or any health insurance or any benefits. Nothing. But the risk of checking the green card was on these fly-by-night temporary agencies rather than on the seafood houses, and that was true in recycling operations, other low-end businesses that employed undocumented immigrants.
Yes, it's a very organized operation.
Yeah, it was. And the last time I wrote about it was 10 years ago. I haven't been writing for a while, but that was the way it worked then. How it works now, I'm told that E-Verify, which is a system where you can electronically check the real green card to see if it's a real green card that they're giving you, is a little better now. So it may be different, but that's the way it was then.
That's the only way to stop this stuff. If someone's intent on stopping it, you got to stop it at the profit center, at the business. That's the choke point.
Why the Republican Party had divided feelings about this for a long time, because there were the mill owners, and the mill workers who felt very differently about the whole issue of illegal immigration until Trump came along. Really.
Right. No, Jack, you're 100% right about that. So this company, Bianco, they had started out here, I think, in 1985. I think that's when they started. And they over in the Fall River area, and then they came over this way. I think they had some other spots in New Bedford before they opened up this big spot. The other big question to me is, how were they in what is a heavy union town, particularly along the textile industry? How did they keep the unions out of there?
It's a good question. The unions aren't what they once were in New Bedford or anywhere else. The unions that are strong now are municipal unions. And I remember when I was growing up, my mother would say, "Well, don't work for the government. Work for the private sector. The government people don't make any money. It's all changed now." But I'm not sure. I can't think of AFSCME. The Service Employees Union has some power in New Bedford now. I don't hear of a textile workers or a clothing workers union that has power right now. I mean, the biggest clothing factory is Joseph Abood,
right?
And I'm not sure whether they're unionized or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they are either, actually. But it just seemed interesting to me that no politicians were down there celebrating that contract. No unions were down there celebrating that contract.
What are you hinting at, Mr. McCarthy?
You have a Sicilian immigrant, as the Standard Times put, of a mysterious background, showed up here on a cruise ship, I think.
Well, he had a TIF, a tax increment financing break.
Really?
And it was not as big as he wanted, but it was of some significance.
We're talking about licking the plate, huh?
That's him getting a tax break, which has been not unusual in New Bedford or other places as the manufacturing economy has struggled in the United States. But and I'm not saying that the TIF was connected to the undocumented workers there, but certainly the American workers who were, and there were some that were in that plant, knew that many of their co-workers were undocumented.
And neither of us have the story in front of us right now, so maybe it's unfair. Do you know what year he got that TIF, or from what administration you got that TIF?
I did not know. It's in one of our stories. I mean, there are 16 stories.
Right, no, it's a big package.
And the second part of it, smaller part of it, coming tomorrow. I will say that we're very proud of it. It's very hard to do that kind of investigative, in-depth reporting in newspapers now, because we just don't have the staffs that we used to. And this was really done as public service with some very good young reporters. We're proud of it.
And you're breaking news in the story.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic stuff. But I'm just saying that so on the TIFs, those are always tied to jobs.
They may be. I'm not an expert on that.
That's the whole rationale for them being their existence. And there's usually a
But there's usually a loophole. You're supposed to provide this
right.
number of many jobs in return for this amount of tax break, but there are usually exits when they don't.
And there's just not much oversight on them. I think Senator Montigny once said, do we have a check on these things?
Yeah.
Do we ever go out and look to see whether they're actually hiring people?
Yeah.
This GE deal that they just brought to Boston. I was listening to the governor of Connecticut, who of course lost the deal, and was being blamed for it. He was a little bit defensive. He was saying that there's only 200 jobs coming to Massachusetts, that they gave him.
Just the headquarters.
Yeah, they gave him all this money, and they're really only getting 200 jobs. I don't know if that's really true or not, but he's a little bit defensive. But that's interesting.
Tips are not given out as easily in New Bedford as they once were in other places. They still are, but it's a harder hurdle to get now because even the politicians have gotten cynical about tips that were never enforced, as you said.
As we're learning about the Bianco Raid, I think that's kind of new, isn't it? Did you guys, or was that well known? That's the first thing I learned about the tips.
Again, you knew it so well 10 years ago, and then you tend to forget some over time. Right. When I read that this out in editing the story, I thought, oh yeah, I guess so.
That's really interesting because I did those when I was a selectman at Freetown. And, that's interesting.
People should remember the thing about TIFs is they're great if they bring jobs, but other taxpayers have to make up that money because the levy is the levy. When I say the levy, that's the amount of money the city or town has to raise to do business, to do the things that they do. So if you give company X a tax increment financing break to bring 100 jobs and they pay $1 million less than they would have paid, all the other taxpayers have to pay that $1 million, both residential and commercial.
That's right. And particularly then if they're hiring illegal aliens or undocumented workers to do the work that was designed to, because of the prevailing wage, to really uplift a community. I mean, the amount of economic activity that one guy was siphoning off when it was intended across the board, it was an ingenious scheme for Mr. Insoli. He very organized, very, very organized. We're going to take a quick call here. We're talking to Jack Spillane from the Standard Times about the Bianco Raid 10 years ago. Good morning. Thank you so much for holding your live on WBSM. Good morning. Maybe ice got them. I don't know. I don't know what happened to him. There may be something going wrong with that line, but anyway.
Call back if you're still interested.
Yeah, if you're still interested in calling, call back. 508-996-0500. It doesn't seem like 10 years ago, does it?
Well, nothing at my age seems like 10 years ago. It was also 10 years ago that last year that the Puzzles attack happened in the North End of New Bedford, which we did a package on. And it was 10 years ago that the Foxy Lady was shot up in December. We had to decide which ones we were going to make an effort when we did not do that one. But that was a very bizarre event also, and traumatic, certainly for the New Bedford Police Department.
Yeah, I remember speaking to you that day because, and I'm comfortable talking about it now, but I grew up with Scott Medeiros, the guy who did the shooting.
From Freetown.
Yeah. And remember you and I talking about it, and I knew him really well. I mean, McCarthy, Medeiros, we were in a homeroom together. We went to elementary school with him. I never knew him to be an unstable person. I thought he was a fun guy. I mean, we didn't go hang out or go fishing together or anything like that, but every time I saw him, it was a 10 or 15-minute conversation. I didn't even know he owned guns.
Yeah. I've always had a theory that there is a monster in all of us, and there, but for the grace of God, that is a person, I take it, that you never would have predicted could try to commit mass murder. And whatever it was, I think it was a love triangle or something that went wrong. He went over the edge, and that's the inscrutable mystery of human beings. Like, you just don't know.
Well, it's weird when you grow up. I mean, I remember riding bicycles with a kid, at like 5th grade. Really, I knew him really well. And, as I said, I had lost contact with him, but not intentionally. Just, we didn't see each other much. But when I would see him, always good conversation. As you point out, it was a love triangle. The weird part to me was that he shot at the police officers. I think he was trying to get them to kill him. I think that's probably the
murder by cop.
Yeah,
suicide by cop.
Suicide by cop, and of course the real heroic actions down there of of the police.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Because they were outgunned. At that time, I think they have better weaponry now. I mean, he had all this semi-automatic equipment, and the cops in New Bedford did not. So.
Well, they had semi-automatic weapons. They just didn't have long rifles.
Okay.
Just so people know, I'm not sure if you're a gun enthusiast or not, Jack. I sense not.
I actually have a couple from when I was in New Hampshire, just
Do you?
because in New Hampshire almost everybody hunts, and
Right.
I did a little bit of it, but I'm not a gun enthusiast.
It's
but
just a semi-automatic for people at home is a gun. Every time you pull the trigger, you just get one bullet. You got to pull the trigger every time you get one bullet. Now, some have a better. They're just constructed better to fire more bullets, but you still only get one per trigger pull. But he had a lot of ammunition, and first of all, he also knew what he was going to do, which is the element of surprise. But no, the police officer, and one of them shot in the eye, drove the other one to the hospital, or vice versa. I mean, just a real heroic story. And that is interesting. That all happened right in that same time period, huh?
Yeah, all within 1 year. You had Puzzles, the Foxy Lady, and then the Bianco Raid.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break. I see you folks holding. Stay there. We'll get right back to you. This is Chris McCarthy on Sunday Brunch. We have Jack Spillane here in the studio.
14.
I have Jack Spillane here in the studio. We're talking about, the year that was 10 years ago, because it's expanded. We were talking about the Bianco Raid, but there's been a lot of other stuff. I see you've been holding. I'm going to go right to the phones. Good morning. You're live on WBSM.
Yes, 3 months later, they were down there making parachutes. So you'll know. Yes, they were open 3 months later making parachutes for the government contract.
Wasn't it a different company, Michael?
Illegal aliens. Yeah, they set up another company, but it was the same. And they were using illegals. And we don't refer to them as undocumented workers. Use the right term. Illegal aliens. Have a good day.
I always think of aliens as coming from like another planet or something.
Thank you, Michael. I think at one time I hated that term undocumented alien. Well, I don't know, hate's not the right word, but because it just reeked of political correctness from my perspective. I think it's been around long enough now that everyone knows what it means.
I don't have any trouble with it. It's a precise term. It's an accurate term. It's a little archaic.
Yeah. But the real problem here is that we have these businesses that are doing this because they wouldn't come if there wasn't an economic incentive. Economic incentives drive everything, and so.
And another thing, we sent Peter Pereira and Becky Evans to Guatemala after the raid. They spent a little time down there, and they came across things, a hidden aspect of NAFTA in different macroeconomic international trade policies is that the corporatization of farms in Central America has made it very hard for peasants to survive in subsistence farms the way they traditionally did. So those people have come in to the cities where there's been a lot of violence in terms of tensions between the Native Americans, and which are Mayans, and the Ladinos with a D, which are European Spanish Central Americans. And
conquistadors?
So, I'm not sure that term is in use anymore either, Chris. But
the
so
descendants of, though.
Yeah. So there are macroeconomic policies that just on the jobs were lost on this side, jobs were lost on that side, and there's no doubt that some employers would rather deal with non-unionized, low-wage workers with no benefits, even a lot of off the table. At Bianco, the biggest fine was for not paying overtime. So there's a lot of shenanigans that were evidently going on down there.
And I have spoken with immigration lawyers. Mr. Franco, she ran against Liz Warren. Actually, she's a Democrat, but
right.
you wouldn't realize it really when you talk to her. She's an immigration lawyer. She knows it backwards and forwards, and she was explaining to me, just in many ways, even what E-Verify is just a scam.
Is it?
Yeah, that the businesses can get around it. If their intent is to defraud, they can do it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is to the workers who were undocumented then, have they become documented in New Bedford? Are they working? Are they on public assistance? If they are working, are they still working illegally? And those would be terribly interesting questions. I used to see a lot more Central American immigrants walking on Melville Boulevard, and because they didn't have licenses and they didn't drive to the fish houses. I'm not always there, but they don't seem as ubiquitous as they once did. Be interesting to know what's going on now.
I remember after the raid, someone in law enforcement said to me, "Now we have 300 abandoned 1985 Toyota Tercels with Rhode Island license plates all around the south end of New Bedford."
Really?
Yeah, because these people were gone now, and the cars they were using, which were all registered in Rhode Island for some reason. Yeah. There's a loophole there I don't understand.
It's easier to do it in Rhode Island.
Yeah, so, but then they had all these cars now. What were they going to do with them? And it was he said it not. He said it in a joking manner, but he wasn't joking about it. Just saying, look, this is just another one of the issues that we have here.
Well, did you read the story we had about a month ago about the car crash in Falmouth, where they brought about 17 people in a van, 17 people down to shovel snow in Falmouth. The car was being driven by an undocumented worker. One other guy claimed to be the driver. The cops didn't buy it. Several of the people were seriously injured, in Boston and Providence hospitals. And they were all there, and a lot of them had other jobs during the day, and they were all rounded up to be transported to the Cape to do snow shoveling. So that underground economy seems like it's still around.
A state trooper once told me that those white vans with the blacked out windows, they call them slave ships, because they're just driving these people around, whether it's the Chinese undocumented workers, which you never really hear about. But you probably were here when a ship pulled up in the harbor of New Bedford one night, and they unloaded what someone estimated at 400 illegal Chinese, or Asians anyway.
Really?
Into waiting vans and gone.
I have never heard that story.
Oh yeah, it was in your paper.
Chris, you always have a story I haven't heard.
I'm cursed with a good memory. Yeah, it was in the Standard Times. It probably was just like a year or two before you got here.
Right.
Very organized. These guys are waiting. They have vans. They had watchers.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, no one was around at that moment. Ship pulled up. They unloaded what is estimated at 400. They say Chinese, but they could have been any type of Asian person. I don't know exactly what country.
Remember the show The Wire?
Of course.
Where they had brought them in on I think they were Russian prostitutes
right.
into Baltimore, and they bring them in the cargo hold.
Right. But this wasn't a TV show, Jack. This happened here in New Bedford. And I always wonder, where'd they go? Where'd they go? Where they disappeared into. So we don't see much. It's kind of interesting. We focus a lot on people from Central and South America. We don't do much on people from Europe. Of course, there's a lot less, but there's plenty of Irish illegal aliens here in the Boston area.
I have been familiar from time to time of an Irish or Portuguese person who came on a green card and overstayed the time that they could be here and kept working.
Yeah.
They were technically undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, no, they're just as undocumented and just as need to go, as far as I'm concerned, or at least straighten it out. But the Chinese piece was interesting. Yeah, I'll try to find that for you if we'll talk about it sometime. Anyway, I see we have some more people on hold here, so we're going to go right back to the phones. Good morning. Thank you for holding. You're live on WBSM.
Hey, Chris. Ferris Freud calling from New Bedford. I wanted to agree with my brother Michael that the words that are used to describe everything in our lives are sacrosanct. And as he pointed out, the term, and it's a legal term, and that is illegal alien. If you read any of the founding documents or any of the other constitutional documents, the term is alien. It's not illegal immigrant. That's an insult. You can't use the word immigrant with these people because that's an insult to those true immigrants who came in and did it the right way. So your guests slip back into the description of illegal immigrants. They're not. They're illegal aliens. They're not undocumented workers. Their nature is that of alien. It doesn't make them a bad person that they're aliens. It just means that they're here in contravention of the law. And as soon as we start realizing that the words we use for everything, and I'd like to point out another one that the communist left has stuck us with. And it's so ingrained that you won't even suffer an argument about it. And that is the term homosexual. They substitute the word gay.
Come on, buddy. Ferris is a regular caller to the show. And he likes to he's got this giant verbal shoehorn, and I always wait for when he's going to use it. No matter what we're talking about, he's good. Eventually, he will shoehorn his arguments on gay marriage and.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, people are gonna.
But we're here on illegal.
There.
We're here on an important topic, which is the history of New Bedford. He's not even from here, and the Bianco Raid, which I think is as you point out, one of the seminal moments here in the Greater New Bedford area. Let me just bring us back to one more sponsor, and then we'll be back with Jack Spillane.
Sunday Brunch.
And good morning. This is Sunday Brunch. I'm Chris McCarthy. We have Jack Spillane here in the studio with us. In the next hour, we'll have Jay Gonzalez calling in, who's running for the governor of Massachusetts, Democrat. I'm going to talk to him a little bit about what's going on, what his vision of the Commonwealth is, and particularly some of the things that are going on here in southeastern Massachusetts. But, Jack, what do you think is left over from the Bianco Raid in New Bedford? Insania's gone. We believe most of the illegal aliens are gone. The jobs are gone.
I wrote my column about it this morning, and the older I get, the more I try not to preach lessons and take a position as if I have some sort of wisdom. But I just think it would be good if the workers in the city and the immigrants could get together because they have a lot in common.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack, for being here on Sunday Brunch. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.